Every day we get this profound opportunity to turn the density of our ego into fluidity, into consciousness. We are designed to analyze, to process. We have 5 senses. And those 5 senses' job is to protect, to take care of, to preserve. So within that context, we create a lot of stories. We have the concept of the matrix. Imagine the ego being very similar to the concept of the matrix. We are creating stories within stories. We're needing to create building blocks that come together. My mother upset me, or my sister hurt me, or we need to create infrastructures, almost like a Lego, that all clicks together, that creates the story. Predominantly, that is how we don't evolve. Because as long as we're having all these building blocks with all these stories, and as long as we continuously identify with all these experiences, we do not liberate ourselves. So people talk about forgiveness, and this is extremely important. But it's really about renunciation. It's about letting go of an identity, letting go of a story. If I were to come up to you and were to be angry at you, your hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling, all of these senses would all just kick in. And its job is to create self-preservation. It immediately gets involved. So the moment we're talking about a story, that story then needs to create other identities, other familiar similarities of experiences of self-preservation, and they all bond together. So imagine that you are experiencing great sense of rejection. That rejection that you're experiencing, now all of its sensories go out and trying to identify with all the other experiences of self-preservation, and it creates all of these interconnectiveness in how we experience disappointment or angry. Every day you have this opportunity to dissolve the story. Every day there is no story. There is no pain. There is no disappointment. These are all things in which we identify, things that we are taught to self-preserve. So the senses, in a lot of ways, do not define our spiritual identity, our spiritual evolution. In actuality, they are there for self-preservation. Love is one of these very profound states of consciousness that is real. But in order to experience this abode of love, to become not just your toe in the river, but you've submerged yourself into love, into consciousness, we on a daily basis have the opportunity to turn the ego back into fluidity, and the way to do that is not only through meditation or through being able to chant or spiritual practices that allow us to return us back to the source. Consciousness is consciousness. There is no story about traffic. There is no pain. There is no story when it comes to consciousness. The only way that we can experience our fullest potential as consciousness is to be conscious. And that is to be conscious of. If I'm driving in traffic, and it might be very busy, but there is no story, there is no traffic. It is just an external experience, but I'm experiencing internally is a continuously movement of the universe. I could be in disagreement with someone, and that disagreement is an external experience, but it doesn't define, or nor should I move into a self-preservation or building a story upon my story with a friend, the moment it is done, it's done. Everyone lives in a time that doesn't exist. So in real time, in this particular moment, this moment only lasts 7 seconds. That means that in 7 seconds, it's gone. There is no past. So we at ego and our senses identify with the ego identity versus real time. In real time, I'm getting renewed in consciousness. I'm getting renewed in love. I'm getting renewed in consciousness. In ego time, there is a story. The ego or the matrix needs to create this infrastructure and needs to find all these other infrastructures. So for me to watch people online talking about endless conspiracies about COVID, about are we going through a massive awakening? Absolutely. But have we gotten so involved that we need to control? Because anytime we don't feel safe, which is an ego identity, the moment we don't feel that we're in control, we need to create infrastructures that give us a sense of false identity. So when I listen to all these stories on Facebook and all these conspiracies, these are people desperately trying to create another reality of control. This is not how we experience consciousness. That's not how we awaken. The journey about our evolution is not about understanding or believing that if I do this and this and this and this and this, I'm going to be totally good. We need to stop trying to understand and control everything. Because we're consciousness. We're divine. We are love. That's it. So, do I believe that we need to take precautions in a very challenging time? Absolutely. But it isn't really about COVID. It's about our need to be in control. It's our need to feel that we can control everything around us, have a deep need to understand. And as long as we keep introducing that into the brain, into our thinking process, then that process is to protect itself. So the moment I feel concerned, the moment I feel worried, the moment I am angry, it is the natural instinct of our humanness, our ego identity, to start to solve it. But of course, there is nothing to solve, because no matter how many answers we get, the ego never gives the solution, because that is a part of our 5 senses. There are no solutions. There's only love. So to experience love, you have a choice every day to move back into consciousness, move back into the fluidity of love, not the density of the ego. And every day you got an opportunity to release something that you normally need to understand, identify with, or control. And that is everything around you, until you can just be love. People talk about that they want to experience peace, but we can't experience peace as long as we're continuously processing and we're continuously controlling. In order to experience a deep sense of consciousness, a deep sense of love, all of your senses, your intellect, your intelligence cannot be in overdrive. Because as long as we're identifying, processing, creating stories, we cannot experience the majesty, the magnificence of who we truly are.